what really drives us is that work around equity, right? And I know that right now we're living in a day and age and a time and space in which that word equity, right, as part of DEI is under attack. But
Yeah.
when we talk about equity in the sense of ensuring that all students across a school building are getting what they need, that's where, again, we really have rooted our work. And so a lot of that work has been around the space of multilingual, or I'm sorry, multi-tiered systems of support, right? So again, going back to, hey, this student is not having success with just what they're getting in the classroom. What additional, right, instruction can we give them? Okay, maybe that's a small group instruction. Okay, they're still not having success. Now maybe they need that tier 3, right, support, right? But ensuring that students are getting what they need in order to have success in school. That really is the work of equity.
Welcome to another episode of TomoClub podcast series. I'm Avinash Bansal, co-founder at TomoClub. And today in our discussion, we have the school principal of Mitchell Elementary School, Maurice McDavid. The topic of discussion is going to be about linguistic diversity and equity in education. I think it's a very important discussion right now, given everything that's happening around us, of how we are still working progressively towards the strategies for inclusive schools. And thank you so much for taking out time, Morris, today for this discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and to talk further about this discussion.
Perfect. So, of course, first thing I always begin the discussion is I want to understand about your journey, like a snapshot. And if you can share us what got you into education in the first place, and is that reason still valid after so many years?
Oh, that's a great question, and I'll start by answering that second part. At 100% is still valid. It's very much so still a major part of the work that I do and what I am thinking about on a daily basis. I actually got a chance to head off to college. I'm originally from DeKalb, which is where I currently work and have spent a majority of my career. But rather than staying here and going to the local university, which was Northern Illinois, I headed downstate to Galesburg. I attended Knox College and originally went there to be a political science major. Really had every intention on trying to be the very first Black president. Well, my sophomore year of college, that was ruined when Obama was elected. And so, but I actually got closed out of a political science class and ended up taking this class called Education, School, and Society. It was Ed 201. In that class, we went and saw Freedom Writers, starring Hilary Swank, and her character says in the movie, you know, I was going to become a lawyer, but by the time you're defending a kid in the courtroom, it's too late, and that the real battle is in the classroom. And I decided to become an education major with the intention of fighting that battle for justice and equity. And that is still very much so a focus for the work that I'm doing in my current role. And I imagine I'll continue to do in whatever role God sees fit to give me in the future.
No, I love that statement that you said, that because when you see a lot of movies, you get to know a lot of real life stories that once you're set in the path of like wrongdoings, then there's no coming back. Like the facilities are not corrective in nature. They will put a stamp and, you'll definitely end up in that ghettos and all that negative space. So I think school has a huge role to play over there. But I understand that motivation, right? But a lot of people do not take that leap. And provided you have multiple things in your mind, from political career to lawyer, and being an educator is a very different ball game. How did that thing happen? If I can know some story there.
Yeah, I think again that one little quote got me, but then I would say as I got more and more into the education space, I learned a lot about, and I think the ed program at Knox really does a good job of understanding education as a change agent, right? That education can be part of the great equalizer. I know that there's various quotes about that, and I don't know that I necessarily believe that it is the great equalizer, but it can be part of creating a more equitable system. And so thinking about that, as I learned more and more about those pieces throughout my education, my undergrad, program, it was huge. I think the other piece, though, is there was one particular moment where I was doing some of my early observations, and I was in a shirt and tie, and in fact, this day I had on a sweater vest. I had on some brown Giorgio Vertini shoes, and I walked in and I overheard this young black male student say, "Look at him! He looks like he makes $1 million." And I remember it being so impactful that he got a chance to see somebody who looked like him in that education space. We know that nationally here in our country, just around 2% of educators are black male educators. And so to be an additional part of that, that was something that really was like, okay, this representation piece matters.
Hmm.
And so that was a big kind of shove over the edge, right? Of like, no, we're going to stick with this. We're going to do this.
No, love that. And I wish that boy's statement economically also proves to be true.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
Because I know teachers tend to not make that money, even the administrators. So
Right.
it's tough out there. Like, I think, not talking about the race over here, but in terms of the gender part, um, it was mostly dominated by women because their contribution to the family income was usually secondary. And now what's happening right now in the state that everyone needs double income to sustain.
Yeah.
So even the female dominance in education as educators, even that is not sustainable.
Right.
So yeah, it's a bit of a hassle over there, but yeah, but that gives me even more respect for educators that beyond all these challenges, they still put up so many hours, so much love for the kids. Now coming to our discussion, and I want to discuss about the linguistic diversity. Um, like you start like the Mitchell Elementary is pretty brand new, right? It's a pretty brand new neighborhood.
It opened this school year. It has been open for roughly 8.5 weeks.
Okay. How many enrollments did you guys get?
We are just around 420 students.
That's insane. So was there like an existing gap in the neighborhood, or like how did this become up into being?
Yeah, so our school building actually does operate as a community school. And so, by that, I just mean that the students who live immediately around it are come to our building. I would say probably well over 90% of the students coming to our building walk to school, right? Because they're within a mile and a half. And so, what really happened is while we had space in the school buildings that existed, class sizes were larger
Hmm.
than our teachers union and leadership wanted them to be.
Right.
And then additionally, the students living in the neighborhood where Mitchell is located
Hmm.
were being bused to all over across the city. And so the construction of this school kind of eliminated that need for busing and made it so that way folks could again walk to school, and it also decreased class sizes across the school district. And so that was kind of the dual purpose of this school building coming into being, and we're excited about being open and continuing to build and grow.
That's amazing. Congratulations. I think that's
Thank you.
and I'm pretty sure it's gonna go up from here only. So when you're starting a new school, right? So when were you hired? Like, did you had a chance to think about the initial structure, initial ethos, or I would say like an language shape, like language identity shape, right now in the early days, or were you hired post that?
Yeah, so I was hired a year prior to it opening. So I worked the 24-25 school year as the principal of Mitchell, or a principal with no school building, right?
Yeah.
And so, but that meant I got to be very much so involved in some of the physical design, some of the intentionality behind the use of those spaces, right? And so those things were really neat. I was, wrote the original draft of what our vision would be, of what our mission would be, and then took that out to the community, and the community got to be involved in helping to draft that mission and vision, and redraft. And so it really was, I think, a beautiful opportunity to be intentional about including the community and some of that design, and then. Again, I hired every staff member, who works officially for the district. I hired them. I brought them in, and so it was a lot of hiring. It was a lot of work to kind of get us to that place, and we're still doing hiring right now. So if you're listening and you need a job and you're near in Northern Illinois, come through. Got a chance to be a part of a lot of that. Yep.
Pretty cool. So how many teachers or administrators did you hire in a year?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate to have an assistant principal and a dean of restorative behavior.
Hmm.
And then, in terms of certified teaching staff, that includes 3 social workers. It includes 3 special education teachers for a self-contained program, a 4th one for a different self-contained program. We are a 3-section building, meaning that we have 3 sections at each grade level, kindergarten through 5th grade. So that's 18 teachers, that we hired there, 2 PE teachers, a music teacher, an art teacher, and paraprofessionals. We've got 20 some odd paraprofessionals. So all in all, our staff is right around just over 70. And a majority of those were folks that I interviewed and brought in and hired. So
That's a massive undertaking, I would say, that you have done in a year. So tell me, like, what was the what was a part in that mission and vision about the linguistic diversity? What were your thoughts initially when you were designing that draft?
yeah, so I think it was interesting because as I was working through this whole process, I was also working on this book that my podcast partner and I co-authored called Your Words Are Fire: 10 Culturally Responsive Teaching Strategies That Speak the Language of Belonging and help students learn, problem solve anyways, it's a long title. That's neither here nor there. But I mention it because we bring that released actually in May of this year, and so I'm kind of doing these parallel projects of working on this school building and working on this book. And initially my thought was very much so because I'm coming from a dual language school building where I had been principal, like, oh, language may not be as much of a important piece in this new school building. But I really, as I was writing and thinking through those things, it very much so is. Our building is largely, it's well over 70% African American, and thinking a lot about what we refer to in the book as African American vernacular English, and how some of the dialects spoken by our students, or that vernacular spoken by our students, does not match, right, the standard American English that is taught in schools. And so being able to really think through how do we cross that bridge, right, where even though we're talking about English,
Mm-hmm.
right, there are 2 different vernaculars, there's 2 different dialects, right? And so one of the things that became incredibly clear for me as we were writing the vision was that we wanted students who were strong readers, who were able to decode words, but also were able to comprehend what they were reading. And we knew that the data for the students that we were bringing into the school showed that that was an area that we needed to work on. And so we've thought about language, I think, from the very beginning, because we want, part of our vision is that we are creating skilled readers, right? And that concept of literacy being incredibly important. And part of that has got to be an understanding of the linguistic diversity that exists in our building, even though, a majority of our students, overwhelming majority of our students, only speak English.
So how does that impact on ground? Like, how does the instructional content, or not the content, but the delivery changes? Are there any professional development for teachers on that front? How does that actually happen on ground?
Yeah, so there definitely are some practices, and again, I don't mean to keep referencing the book, but just because
Yeah,
it's fresh in
that's
my
okay.
mind, right? We have in there these 10 strategies, right, that we've kind of hit. So some of the things that we talk about there is really having a basic understanding of language
Hmm.
helps you to be a better language teacher. I think beyond that, really understanding that every teacher is a language teacher, right? And so we sometimes we think about like, oh, I'm taking Spanish class, right? So this person is teaching me a whole new language. But the truth is that when we are sitting in a science class, right, they are teaching us using the language of science, right? And so really understanding, right, and this has been some of the PD that we are working on delivering, is understanding, right, morphology, understanding syntax, understanding, right, that this word, right, synthesize, is the verb, but synthesis, right, is the noun, right? And so understanding it's really talking about the same thing. It's just a matter of, is it acting, or are we talking about the act itself, right? But
Right.
that's linguistics, right? That helps you to understand it. The second piece, right, that we are really emphasizing here at the beginning is how we can utilize the language that students already bring into the classroom to understand some of that more tier three vocabulary, right? Where you're talking about things that are specific to a particular content, but how can we talk about it in a way that is common and fluid for our students, right? And so thinking about, again, an understanding of a political party, right?
Yeah.
Right. If I'm asking you to think about what is a political party, but I can understand it as, oh yeah, that's a group of homies that have the same mindset, right? They have the same belief system, and so that's why they all kick it together, right?
Hmm.
And they try to promote their ideas. Well, now all of a sudden we've talked about a political party, but in a way that is common, right? And so we're allowing for that transfer of vocabulary, right, from this more abstract area, right, of government to something that I can understand, right, in my day to day life.
No, that makes sense. And feel free to always reference the book. I think uh, there's no harm in that. It's a good way that you were able to give a structure to your thoughts and put it out there. Um, Also, you did mention about that language is not just like a skill, but it talks about belonging. So a lot of times teachers have to think, or schools have to think about accommodating bilingual students. But you talk about leveraging that language as a learning asset. So this sounds very good, but I have no idea what it feels like on ground. So how do you
Yeah.
leverage language as a learning asset?
Yeah, so I think I want to address that first part too. That idea of language as part of identity. It's very important, right? That if somebody says, right, um, I um, I didn't even do nothing, right?
Hmm.
So we understand that according to standard American English, I didn't even do nothing, right, is not the correct format for standard American English
Hmm.
because of the double negative. Now,
Yeah.
I'll throw out there that the double negative is a rule that was made up randomly in like the early 1800s, right? It hasn't always been that way for the English language. But um, when you say something like, well, that's incorrect, that's improper, you're actually not attacking just that language or just that child, but that child actually receives love and nurture from people who speak like that, right? And so
Mm,
now you're telling them that that's improper, right? And so I think it's important to be able to both elevate, right, standard American English in our instruction without having to um, push down or denigrate, right, some of the other vernaculars and other languages that students come in speaking. The
mm,
second piece, though, is I didn't even do nothing as a perfect opportunity to write that sentence on the board and then say, in standard American English, how would we say this? I
mm,
didn't even do anything,
mm,
right? And now you've seen both on the board, both are elevated, right? This is correct when you're speaking to your friends or your families or on the weekend, and this is how you want to write it when you're writing your paper or you're, going to this interview.
mm,
And both things can be okay, right? But actually, it provides an opportunity for that comparative and contrastive analysis, right? To say, oh, okay, so when I said I'm finna go to the store,
mm,
I could also say I am going to go to the store
mm,
or I am getting ready to go to the store, right? And now we haven't taken anything away from a child. We've added an additional way for
mm,
them to be able to say something.
mm.
Um, but that's a shift in our mindset. That is an asset-based approach as opposed to a deficit-based approach.
I'm so thankful that you gave that example because it actually shifted my mindset within 5 minutes. So
Good.
so I think it can be so powerful when done in classroom on multiple occasions, especially for those young learners who are coming from home
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
elementary. Absolutely. Um, so, like you said that you came from a dual language school. What does that mean? Like, was there two different languages of instruction that you can choose from, or for like math, science, social science? What does that actually mean on ground, and
Yeah.
what practices from that experience became non-negotiable when you were designing this school's model?
Yeah, perfect. So we operated in both English and Spanish. It was a dual language school, and students received reading instruction in both English and in Spanish, and then they did math um, in English. They did science in English. They did social studies in Spanish. By the time I left, right? And so there was kind of this split of what topics were being taught and what. And there's different models for it that I've seen, whether it's a 50-50 model where they are spending half their day in English, half their day in Spanish, or whatever that other language may be. But right, students then are learning through that immersion process, right, where I am learning content in this second language. And so loved that. In fact, I've actually got that was in another district where I was principal, but here in my home district, where I'm back working, I actually have a niece and a nephew who are in the two-way dual language program here. And so both of them have had an opportunity to learn, right, in English and in Spanish, and are able to communicate with me. I'm a former Spanish teacher, fluent in Spanish, and so that's something that's been really neat. I would say, though, one of the non-negotiables that has definitely come out of my time at that building was that, particularly when you are talking about growth in the area of literacy and you're asking students to grow in more than one language, one of the non-negotiables has been that we are going to track student progress relentlessly, right? We are going to make sure that we are operating, using a multi-tiered system of support, right? That MTSS model or RTI model, as it has been called in the past as well. We're really wanting to make sure, right, that we are looking at our instructional practices and we are determining, are they being effective? Particularly when you think about students who are needing to learn two languages, we do not have time to waste on strategies that aren't being effective,
Mm,
right? And unfortunately, right, here's one of the things that can happen. I found this cute lesson on such and such website,
mm,
right? And so I'm going to do this lesson regardless of whether or not it's actually meeting the standard or being effective for our students. Well, okay, I see you. Maybe the kids were even engaged, but is it moving students forward in their learning progress, right? And so that is something that we are building that system right now.
mm,
I'll be honest with you, I'm spending a lot of time right now with our building, working on building culture, working on building social, emotional, and behavioral expectations. But in the meantime, there's an undercurrent that we are building these systems for instructional progress, right, for academic progress. So that way, when those foundations of SEL and behavior are fully cemented,
mm.
we're ready to take off, right, and make sure that we're seeing the tremendous growth that we need.
Love that. That's perfect. And all the best for that as well. I think language and social emotional learning are so closely connected. Even the belonging aspect comes
Yep.
with. Um, it's all about how do you implement it to be engaging. So
Right.
like so one of the product that we work in is actually uh, teaching social emotional learning through multiplayer games. So we do these game sessions, digital game sessions, and then their discussion around it. And I have seen so some teachers were using our product in the English language learners sessions because they thought this was a perfect opportunity for getting them to start talking, for getting them
Yep.
to start interacting and know the way is to learn. Um, I would also love to know about the podcast that you do yourself, the Black Brown Bilingual podcast. So
Yeah.
tell us about it. What's the thought process behind it? Who's the audience? How does it work?
Yeah. So let me give you kind of our origin story. First off, it is co-hosted between by myself and then also a dear friend and colleague, Lisette Jacobson, who operates as the director of ML multilingual curriculum for a district not too far from here. But she and I were going through our master's program together in principal leadership, and we'd leave class and we were out in the parking lot, an extra 30 minutes having these super dope conversations where we were like, man, yo, we should be recording this. And we are like, yo, we should start a podcast because we're millennials and why not, And so um,
Mm,
we talked about it. We actually graduated from that program in 2016, came back. We were in our superintendency program. No, we weren't in that program yet, but we were both kind of moving through administration, these different roles and things. Well, in 2020, when things kind of slowed down, right, with a lot of the shutdowns and stuff during COVID, we took the time to go ahead and said, okay, now is the time. Let's make this happen. And so, um, we started the podcast. Came the title "Black, Brown, and Bilingual" comes from I'm black, she is Latina, and we are both bilingual. We both speak English and Spanish, and really, one of our goals of the podcast was to bring about unity between the Black and Brown community, through storytelling, and obviously we're both educators, and so it definitely has an educator tilt. But I will say that we've had an opportunity to interview folks like Neil deGrasse Tyson.
mm,
We interviewed the majority whip at the time, Representative Claiborne. We interviewed Representative Chuy Garcia out of Chicago, and so we've had an opportunity to talk to authors and to talk to producers in Hollywood and to talk to just lots of different folks. And so I think our audience is really anybody who's interested in conversations around equity and justice and building that connection between the Black and Brown community. But I definitely think we always come back to our roots, which is education. And so looking in particular at how, for example, representation in Hollywood makes a difference, and right, ultimately though landing back in that education space, which is the work that we are both incredibly passionate about. Coming out of the podcast, though, we then have done several professional developments. Ended up starting a consulting company together called SEMA of Illinois, which is culture, identity, and multilingual advocacy. Is what it stands for, but SEMA is also the Spanish word for mountaintop, and so we kind of liked that play on words. And so again, I've done PD, and then kind of out of the PD came this book. And so the book, like I said, is been published by Times 10 Publishing, who's done a lot of the Hack series books, and we were excited to get a chance to publish with them.
Wow. That's pretty exciting because when I went through, I think you guys have more than I think 30, 40 podcasts till now, or more than that.
Yeah. We've had I think we're in the season 5, and we typically do anywhere from 10 to 13 episodes per season. And so, yeah, we're over 40 episodes.
That's brilliant. And I think even the professional development aspect is nice. So what kind of professional development do you do provide? Is it about teacher training for language, or how it goes?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of training in the area of, again, multilingualism, culturally responsive pedagogy, right, and really student identity work. All of those things have been things that we've done. We really, though, ultimately, I think, again, what really drives us is that work around equity, right? And I know that right now we're living in a day and age and a time and space in which that word equity, right, as part of DEI is under attack. But when we talk about equity in the sense of ensuring that all students across a school building are getting what they need, that's where, again, we really have rooted our work. And so a lot of that work has been around the space of multilingual, multi-tiered systems of support, right? So again, going back to, hey, this student is not having success with just what they're getting in the classroom. What additional, right, instruction can we give them? Okay, maybe that's a small group instruction. Okay, they're still not having success. Now maybe they need that tier 3, right, support, right? But ensuring that students are getting what they need in order to have success in school, that really is the work of equity, and that's what drives a lot of our work, regardless of race, identity, language, all of those different pieces. But we also are very open about the fact that all those things impact how schools serve our students, right? Where those opportunity gaps exist, there will then on the other side of that be some of those outcome gaps.
That's brilliant. I think right now, no discussion about language or any other thing in education cannot be without AI. So I would love to discuss those aspects. So I'll tell you some interesting story. I was listening to a podcast by Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, and he was telling in that podcast that over the last 1 year, how ChatGPT has brought in a massive difference in the human behavior of writing. Because the way ChatGPT puts outputs in with hyphens and with pointers, there's a massive shift in people writing skills based on that. And it's a very small example, but it shows that how deep the impact can be at a huge scale, whether it's writing or listening or reading or communicating skills, working with AI. So with that context, I would love to know, how has your school taking it? What's your AI policy?
We have a district-wide AI policy, and we've bought in, right? We recognize that there is a temptation to be like, no, don't do it, leave it alone, right? I heard a story the other day about this college, I think they were in Canada, that wrote a position paper on the use of AI, basically saying don't use it. They used AI to write the paper about not writing it, using AI. And so when I think about just the potential that it has as a brainstormer, the potential it has, I was just talking with some folks about this the other night at dinner, that a student could take their whole paper and put it in there and say, offer me feedback on how to make this more concise. How can I increase my level of vocabulary usage, right? And now all of a sudden AI is able to offer feedback. I do think obviously there's a danger that exists in students just trying to completely use AI to produce something and then call it their own. Um, but it's not too challenging when that student has never used the word, precocious, right?
Mhm.
They've never used the word precocious in their entire time you've known them. Now all of a sudden it's showing up in their paper. Like, bro, you used AI. You cheated and you tried to call this your own. So I think that there's so much potential. I think that we will bear the responsibility of ensuring that students know how to use it effectively, right?
Mhm.
And to be completely frank, not a bridge that we have crossed yet at Mitchell. We're
Mhm.
just trying to build the bridge. You know what I'm saying? So we certainly have not crossed it yet. But it will be something that, in my mind, is very pertinent to the work that we're going to do, and in order to have some success. Because again, that ability for it to even be like a tutor, right? Hey, I'm struggling with this particular concept in math. What can you do to help me with this, right? And now all of a sudden it's tutoring students in ways individually, right? In ways that one individual teacher can't do for all 25 kids,
Right.
right? In that very moment.
No, I agree. I think the opportunity from the efficiency part of the teachers to teaching teachers about ethics, which they can further teach to the students, or about the personalization, where teachers can help create differentiated content and assessments and assignments and rubrics. And of course, how students should use it. There's a lot of things to do. So, is it like these kind of professional development only comes to you from the district office, or you guys have the liberty to choose programs for your teachers independently?
Yeah, so we definitely have the liberty to design some of that PD. We actually have an hour-long staff meeting twice a month where I'm setting the agenda for that. I'm trying to set that agenda based off of what we need in this moment, what feedback we're hearing from staff. But what I will say is that we right now um, again are just really focused on building that foundation of SEL culture, character, right? And so we have not gotten to a lot of that, but again, that's something I'm definitely looking forward to that I think will be major. I've got a lot of young teachers who are
Mm.
already very aware, right? And I think that they're going to be quick adopters, right? Those early adopters. I'll have some laggards for sure, but we'll have some early adopters who are going to jump on board when we get to a place where we're providing that PD.
No, absolutely. Because sometimes, especially in a new school, uh, like working with the district office can be tricky, because they're thinking from an overall perspective, and you have to think from an individual perspective. So I have heard that a lot of principals have that kind of self budget to invest in products and
Yeah.
services to help their school. So I'm glad you have that decentralization to work it out. Um, and of course, I think on the social emotional learning aspect, there are a lot of things from the technology to PD which needs to be done. Also, if you're coming back to the linguistic topic, AI tools can do a lot of translation, right? You mentioned yourself the tutoring aspect, the scaffolding aspect instantly. So, how do you see AI supporting teachers of multilingual learners? Of course, at the same time, without making it the student voices to be flattened.
Right. Yeah, that is definitely going to be the challenge. I think, right, when we talk about language learning, it is important that we are not just translating,
Yeah.
right? So one of the things that we uh, would see happen on occasion in my previous district was a teacher would stand up front with a student who was new to the country, so really only spoke fluently in Spanish, and the teacher would speak in English and then would just translate themselves directly in Spanish, Well, the problem with that is that the student knows Spanish, so they're not listening to the English, right? They're just going to wait until you say it in Spanish because I know that. And right, our brain is like, oh, good, I have to work less. Right. And so yeah, I got to do the hard work if I'm working in if I'm trying to listen to the English and then make meaning of the English, and if I know she's going to repeat it in Spanish anyways, I'll just wait and listen to the Spanish. So I think that's one of the dangers, right, of the translation piece. But I do think that AI can be incredibly powerful in the production of activities and in the production of practice opportunities, right, to then practice with that language, right? And so, I'm thinking about ways in which you could, again, create an image slide deck, right, where that student is now identifying that image in English. Let's say if they're learning English, right, they're identifying that slide deck in English. And in fact, I shared this the other day with a friend whose student is taking freshman Spanish and is trying to learn vocabulary. And I said, well, one of the things we do wrong is we take the word apple and we say, oh, apple is manzana.
Hmm.
Well, no, apple is not manzana. Apple is apple and manzana is manzana. They both mean this shiny red thing that you can eat,
Yeah.
right? And so if you show a picture of an apple and say, oh, es manzana, or you
Hmm.
can say, oh, it's an apple. Both of those are correct. But apple and manzana, right? That ability to create that slide deck, right? Those pictures, those words, creating a list of cognates, right? Those words that are the same or not the same, but that are very similar between English and Spanish or between whatever the languages are that are being learned. There's, yeah, an endless opportunity, I think, of what AI can help you to produce
Hmm.
to effectively practice the skills of language learning as opposed to just here's what I said in English translated into that language. Now, I'll end with this. That being said, I have definitely used AI when I was trying to communicate with a parent,
Yeah.
right, who only spoke Nepali.
Hmm.
I don't speak Nepali. I can't write Nepali. I'm not familiar enough with Nepali to be able to like translate it and try to say it. So I literally used Google Gemini
Hmm.
and it read it out loud. So that way that person could hear it and then answered back through Google Gemini and then it
Hmm.
translated back to English, right? And so there is a place for that where you're trying to build those relationships with families.
No, absolutely. I think AI can definitely help that bridge gap very quickly. If you have to like design one AI powered tool, suppose we have the all the budgets and all the knowledge about it, what would you want that AI to do for your teachers? What would be your priority, or what would be your problem that you want to solve with that AI tool?
Ooh, that's a fun question. That's a fun question. I think that I would want a tool that gives clear step by step processes to move that child from where they are as a reader to the grade level where they should be. I've got students reading a couple of grade levels below, right?
Mhm.
And we know that that creates challenges. It creates social emotional problems. It creates behavioral problems. And so if there was a quick and fast way to be able to say over these next 4 weeks, you're going to be boom up there because AI is going to step by step, tell you what you need to do. And now all of a sudden that student feels like they can access grade level curriculum with their peers.
Hmm.
That would be really, really powerful. And the thing is that there are programs that are being sold right now that tell you that that's what they can do, and it ain't
Yeah.
happening, folks. Because there's a human element, right? There's a human element of needing to get that student to commit and that student to share the common values and common goals, right? There's a human element that I think AI continues to miss. So maybe this AI tool would actually also know, how do I get this particular student to engage in these strategies and really buy in from a social emotional, right, perspective, not just the here's what I'm supposed to do, but now I know AI is going to help me to figure out what's going to motivate that child to then do the work.
You know what? I always advise so many administrators out there that you don't need to buy any product for this. I think if we do the right prompting, we have the right training, we can get this kind of personalization even from free ChatGPT part or free Gemini, um,
Okay.
of how we can, enable that. So yeah, I think that's lovely. Last question that I have is, so you're building a model school for your district, right? 5 years from now, how do you hope that your approach to this linguistic diversity, community partnership, responsible AI, how do you see this all coming together 5 years from now? If you can, paint a picture of how would that look like?
I'll start here. Number one is success.
Hmm.
We are having success, and success is defined by having students who are, again, emotionally intelligent leaders. They are skilled readers, and they are able to think critically in order to solve problems.
Hmm.
Um, I think that, additionally, right, the way that that'll be happening is we will have built systems, right? We will have built systems that are monitoring
Hmm.
how our students are performing and giving us an opportunity to be responsive to that.
Hmm.
We are having regular conversations about the the linguistic diversity that exists in our school building, even though, again, most of our students are speaking English. We are using a professional learning community model to really ensure that best practices are happening both horizontally, right across a grade level, and vertically across all grade levels.
Hmm.
Um, and and I think so much of this, and we don't talk about this enough, so much of this is a heart issue more than a head issue.
Yeah.
So we've got staff and family and students and leadership that believe
Hmm.
that what we're doing is important and worth it, and worth the time and worth the energy and worth the bumps in the road, um, because we are impacting people's lives.
Yeah.
I think about good teachers that I had that really had an impact on my life, where I am today as a 37-year-old. Um, so so that's probably honestly the biggest piece is that heart piece, right? Is that our hearts are in the right place 5 years from now, and as a result, everything else, right, falls into place.
That's really beautiful, and that's true. Every one of us gladly have at least one or two teachers which played a massive role in our character development, in our love for education or community
Yeah,
in general. And it's so the best part is that the same educator that I like may not be liked by others, and vice versa. So it's always a two-way street, that I always say.
right,
And
right.
what you just said in that 5-year vision, listening to your podcast for the last 30 minutes, I think it's very well possible that would achieve it much sooner. At least the heart to the mind aspect, and even the technology aspect. I think things are rapidly evolving. So whether it's real time feedback to the students, whether it's uh, student practicing and actually using language as a leverage, I think a lot of things is gonna be much more quicker than we can imagine. And with
Yeah,
that, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and ideas. um, we have this one, like a ritual. So we do a podcast, we always ask if you can share one question that you want me to ask the other school leader that I'll do a podcast with. So what would that question be? And when I get the answer, I'll get back to you.
Okay, perfect. I would say my one question uh, for that next school leader is probably how are you building community
Hmm.
with in your school building and without your school building, right? So on both the inside of your school building and the outside of your school building.
That's a good question. Definitely. I'll definitely get back to you when I have that answer. But thank you so much.
Okay,
This was fantastic, and it was lovely having a discussion with you.
absolutely. Thank you, Sam. You thank you for the invitation.